But we start this hour in the Middle East, and in a stark condemnation of the ongoing crisis, the Roman Catholic Church's top cleric in the Holy Land, Latin Patriarch Pierbattista Pizzaballa, described the humanitarian situation in Gaza as morally unacceptable. This after visiting the war-torn region. Pizzaballa shared disturbing accounts of men enduring hours in the scorching sun, waiting for a meal. He called the conditions unjustified and urged for immediate action to address the crisis. The comments come as global attention intensifies over the potential suffering of Palestinians within the Gaza Strip. And joining us to discuss these latest comments and the wider situation and global calls for humanitarian relief is Ross Feingold, a political analyst joining us from Taipei, Taiwan. Ross, as always, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us. Let's first look at these comments that have come from the top cleric of the Roman Catholic Church. How significant is this? The fact that it's a top member of the church, of course, a church that oversees over 1 billion people across the world.
The Israeli government has been fairly resistant to criticism of its war over the past nearly 2 years. So whether that criticism is coming from European governments, Middle Eastern governments, or now the Catholic Church, at least based on past experience, is unlikely to change the policies of the Netanyahu government or how it conducts the war or how it admits relief into the Gaza Strip. There's talk about a ceasefire again. There's renewed talk about that in recent hours. And under the circumstances of a ceasefire, Israel will let in more aid. But short of a ceasefire agreement, it just doesn't appear that Israel is going to change its policies. And that basically means the criticism from the Patriarch, the Latin Patriarch, is really not going to have any effect on Israel's government.
If this comment and this condemnation isn't going to have any impact, Ross, do you think the diplomatic efforts of 28 countries who have spoken out about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, is that likely to strike more of a chord with the Israeli government, or is this just a continuation of Israel's military plan until a ceasefire is agreed?
At the moment, we'd have to assume it's not going to have any impact on Israel. Israel has gotten a lot of criticism from different parts of the world, from members of parliament, from governments, and increasingly from governments, and of course lots of media criticism as well. But this long into the war, one thing that we've known is that Israel's government has proven very resistant to the criticism of the impact on civilians. And they continue to conduct the war against Hamas as long as Hamas remains a fighting force. And up to now, the fact is Hamas has retained its own military capability, and it continues to battle Israeli soldiers in the Gaza Strip. So again, the hope returns to a ceasefire, and we see the stakeholders are working on that in recent days. There's been a lot of news about that. And the best we could do is hope that there will be a ceasefire and significant amounts of aid could resume. But short of that, it doesn't look like Israel is going to change its policies or allow more aid into the Gaza Strip.
Yes, Ross, finally, let's look at this diplomatic effort from mediators, including the US, Qatar, Egypt, alongside, of course, these comments from other European leaders and world leaders. Where do you think the push needs to be sort of put in? Is it a push on Israel and a push on Hamas, or is this just about compromise? And how do these mediators try to reach that as soon as possible to stop deaths on both sides and, of course, return those hostages still being held, both dead and alive, by Hamas?
Yeah, there's going to have to be some compromise on both sides. Israel's position is that Hamas has to give up its weapons and leave the Gaza Strip, and Hamas's position is that they want to retain a role in the future governance of the Gaza Strip at the end of the war, and they want any agreement to have a pathway towards ending the war. So their negotiating positions or their goals are so far apart, which really can only give us hope that there'd be some kind of temporary agreement. But the problem with any kind of temporary agreement is that fighting resumes eventually, and we've seen that happen several times with previous ceasefire agreements. But in the immediate interest of getting more aid into the civilians who are certainly suffering, then nobody would deny that. The best hope would be that the two sides would at least come to a temporary agreement that would be a ceasefire and would allow a resumption of large-scale aid. And they're going to have to recognize that they're not going to get the other side to agree to what they want in any kind of short-term ceasefire. And then, as far as putting pressure on Israel, I did say that they're reluctant or they're resistant to pressure from other governments, but it does have some effect. And the negative portrayal of Israel in the international media, that has some effect as well. I do think Israel is sensitive to that, but to actually change their policies, it's probably going to take a lot of pressure from the Trump administration to actually get Israel to do that and to agree to a temporary ceasefire.
Yes, absolutely, Ross. You will be staying with us as we stay in the wider region.